going to get a lot of clients that are going to reach out saying, I just don't feel like I trust this agent, and they're going to start critiquing their agents more when they know what the commission's going to be. They find out, oh, you're making $10,000 on this sale and it's my first house. I don't feel like you're really helping me and representing me. There's going to be a lot of things. I think that's even more of a case why you should really be building relationships with people, because you're going to be finding that they're going to want you to make a commission. And so they're going to want you to be making 3%, 2.75%. And so when you fill out these buyer broker agreements and you put that, they're going to say, yeah, I want you to pay that. And, if a seller's refusing to pay that from, not just equity in their house, from equity that was achieved by appreciation, which meant, they didn't put any money into it. Values have just gone up enough, and that's what they're using to pay you, right? This is not out of money expenses, which is what I communicate to my sellers, why they should be prepared to pay for a buyer's agent commission. I think there's easy ways for us to really promote this, or there's easy ways for people to start to make a lot less. So I think there's going to be a lot of people leaving the industry. I really do, because I think a lot of people are going to really start cutting back their commission. And as Nate knows, when you're driving around constantly and these deals that should be simple, easy deals get really tough because Uncle Bobby Joe up in the hills has Uncle Bobby Jane fix the roof the way Uncle Bobby Jane wants to fix the roof, and that's not how it should be done. And you're getting your savvy, smart, qualified borrower buying the house saying, no, you said a new roof. It's not a new roof, or it is a new roof that was not done properly. I don't accept that. So you're going to find that there are a lot of people who are going to really start cutting their commission in order to win over clients, especially people who are paying for online leads, people that they have no relationship with. Yes, I know a lot of you work a lot of Op City leads. I know every once in a while we get some Google and social media leads that come through. I don't think that's necessarily bad. I think you need to be really, really good about building a relationship with them. You cannot open the door and just, show some expertise. You need to be meeting with them. You need to find personal ways to connect with them, because when you start asking for these commissions, Nate, if you were making $1,000 on the deal you have right now, would you continue to put as much work and effort into it as you currently are? The one up in Pollock Pines?
Hell to the no. No way.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, as a loan officer, Mary and I started offering better rates to people because we realized, because we're former agents, or, are kind of still agents, we know how much work and effort it goes into it. Whereas for us, it's not that we necessarily kick back. It's a lot of mental stuff. It's a lot of planning. It's a lot of communication. But I know that I can dramatically decrease my commission and still have it make sense because of the time and the effort. Not the effort. There's a good amount of effort, but really the amount of time into each deal. And I mean time is in driving. Driving to it, negotiating with all kinds of weird personalities. Once I've gotten my borrower and we're pre-approving them, I'm working through conditions and solving problems. So it takes a lot of effort, but I'm not having to call this agent who just lied about a roof and lied about a deck. And then now I've got to redo inspections and drive out for another inspect. You know what I mean? So I think what's going to happen with this buyer broker agreement, and I'm going to bet money on this, but people are going to start to reduce their commissions to win over more clients, right? It's the natural, easy way to do it, right? Whenever there's an issue that comes up, the common problem I see with new agents is they say, oh, I'll just pay for that through my commission. Oh, I'll just credit the borrower. And it's like, no one asked you to do that. So why are you offering it? But that's the easy path to take versus just saying, hey, here's the problem. Here are your several options. You either pay for it or you don't. What would you like to do? Right? And people say, I'll just pay for it. Right? Instead, most newer agents tend to give up their commission, and that's like the go-to reaction. It's going to be the same thing with this, right? You're going to get your first client that you need to put together a buyer broker agreement, and you're either not going to do it. So you're going to find yourself showing a house and they've already signed a buyer broker agreement with someone else. And now you're out the commission. You can't prove that you're procuring cause anymore if you didn't have them sign that before showing the house. I want to be crystal clear about that. So if you call me freaking out, I want my commission, I'm procuring cause, my first question is going to be, did you sign the buyer broker agreement before showing them the house? If the answer is no, you're shit out of luck. So just have them sign it. So I think there's a lot of people that aren't going to do that, and then they're going to be frustrated and they're going to leave the industry. The next thing you're going to have people do is they're going to ask for 1%. Now, remember, whatever you have them sign in that buyer broker agreement, when you submit your offer and you check that box that the seller paid for it, you cannot ask the seller to pay for more than what your buyer has agreed to in the buyer broker agreement. I don't agree with that, but I understand why they're doing it. They're saying because you can't be claiming commission on both ends. So I can't have my buyer pay me 2% and I'm asking for 2% because it in the agreement it kind of seems like a little bit of deception. I think it should be okay. I should be able to say, hey, I want 3%, whatever it might be. It's a whole nother conversation. But I think what's going to end up happening is people are going to put really low amounts, and then you're going to have Nate's situation where you're driving constantly and you're getting frustrated, but you have to, even if I am not making anything, I'm making $1, I still owe fiduciary responsibility to my clients, and I still owe the service that I'm supposed to be presenting to them. So you're going to find that a lot of people are going to really reduce their commission, have these tough deals, and they're going to end up canceling them. They're going to leave the industry because it just financially does not make sense. And people are going to start doing the math, and they're going to say, because this happened in the mortgage industry, and people were reducing their commissions way too much, and they were starting to figure out, oh my gosh, I'm making $10 an hour when you added up the hours of effort you're putting into it. So make sure you know your worth and stand by that. I think that you're going to be surprised that when you say your worth, and people are going to match it, then they're going to be okay with it. They're going to find the value in you. So I think people are too quick to set their own limitations, and they're going to say, my buyers can't afford this. Well, find a way for them to afford it. And I think that there's plenty of ways for them to be able to afford it. Not afford your whole commission, but still find ways where you can earn it. What do I mean? I call every single agent, if I'm going to put in an offer and I'm asking for 3%, right? Typically in our area, we get 2 to 2.5%, but I'm going to ask for 3%. And when I call that listing agent, I'm going to say, hey, listen, I keep deals together. I answer my phone and I communicate. The lender I work with all the time. Things are never always perfect, but they will answer their phone and they will communicate with you. We are a team, and that's why we're asking for 3%. I've been a listing agent, and I know what it's like to get offers from people where the agent doesn't answer the phone when tough things come up. When they don't educate their client properly ahead of time. My client is educated properly ahead of time. They know they're not buying a new house. That doesn't mean they're not going to ask for things to be fixed, possibly, but they are educated. I know that I'm going to keep the deal together as best as I can. Obviously, if there's some major issues that comes up that is unforeseen, obviously I can't fix that. But I know what it's like when a buyer's agent, their lender, they've never really worked with them. And then that lender disappears. And now we're 2 weeks, 3 weeks delayed. We are going to, and this is why it's important to work with a lender consistently and really educate your clients as to the value of that. Because lenders should be also disclosing, hey, here's what conditions were already cleared ahead of time going into it. Here's what I think they're going to ask for, and I've already asked for it. It's going to help you as the agent when the lender does that and they validate you saying, hey, we are a team that deserves 3% commission. The lender is going to validate that by calling the listing agent and saying, hey, this is going to be an easy deal on my end because this is what I'm doing, XYZ, or I just got the client's file, but this is what I have on them. This is what I've used AI to analyze the file. Like, we have that capability. These are the documents that they're going to probably ask for. I've already asked for that. I think it's going to be a really smooth transaction on my end. So with all that being said, don't sell yourself short, because you will leave the industry if you sell yourself short with the commission. I don't care if you think it's going to be an easy deal. Very rarely is it. New builds, sure, they're a lot easier, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be an easy deal. And so and to Nate's point, thought he got a new roof, thought he got a new deck for this client. Turns out not really. And so just keep that in mind, as we go into this. So yes, Nate.
So going back to procuring cause, I think also, correct me if I'm wrong, if you actually are showing homes without the buyer broker agreement, you could be fined by car, right? I think there's like a $2,500 fine.
I'm going to go with yes and no. So here's the thing is, I mean, technically I have to have a listing agreement in place in order to list a house. Guess how many times I've been asked to see the listing agreement? Zero. I've had a couple times where, and there were certain reasons for this. I did not have a signed listing agreement. It was partly because they had trouble signing things. I had to sign in person. I just wanted to get their house sold, so I was willing to reduce my commission to like very little because I was helping them buy. But I wanted to be able to, I didn't want to have to keep going to them and changing the listing agreement by an amendment. I knew that at any point we could get an offer and I could make nothing. So I took that bet. I have only done that one time with a client. No one has ever asked for that. So yes, to your point, they're saying that there's a fine. Technically, there's a fine with the listing agreement as well. So no one's going to ask for it. I just think that, and to your point, if I wanted to go and say, no, I was procuring cause, but I didn't have a listing, a buyer broker agreement signed, and I tried to, take them to an ethics hearing, which might happen. People might do that. Well, it's gonna turn around and bite them in the ass, and
Yeah,
because they're gonna get
yourself.
fined for not having that, right?
Yeah, you're telling on yourself.
Yeah, you're telling on yourself. Yeah, you can't plead the fifth at that point. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, yes and no, and no one's going to ask to see it. That's going to be the main thing. You do not have to check the box in the purchase agreement. And so before I really get into the buyer broker agreement, I want people, especially if you're watching online too, or wherever, listening on the call, you have to keep in mind that they might have, California Association of Realtors and all of the local associations, they may have made these contracts, but they are not the attorneys representing you in a deal if there's an issue. Case in point, Chase and I had we had a deal, our brokerage had a deal where it was contingent on the sale of the buyer's property. Buyer they were purchasing a replacement house, so we had the contingency in place. They had no money other than for the inspections and the appraisal. They did not have money for their earnest money deposit. The way the contract reads, there's a box you can check that timelines don't start until after, and I don't have to deliver my earnest money deposit until after I sell my house. But there's some other things that happened. Essentially, I had two attorneys with California Association of Realtors who put that agreement together, arguing with each other. And then finally they said, well, it turns out that next time you just need to type in that their earnest money deposit is not due until whatever. So basically they were having me rewrite the contract. So I just want everyone to keep in mind that although they might come out and say, oh, here's all these rules, they're saying that with so much aggressiveness because they're being sued. And you got to remember that they might have drafted these contracts, but that does not necessarily mean that they are your attorneys. There are a lot of brokerages who add a lot of addendums and a lot of other things for that reason alone. Like we may offer and put together some addendums that are going to be required. Um, you know, and I have to think about case by case what is going to be a reason why we would add an addendum. A lot of it's going to have to do with the listing agreement. So if you get a listing, we're probably going to have you require that along with your listing agreement, you add an addendum saying that although you are agreeing to pay me this commission, there is a likelihood and a great likelihood that most offers will ask you to pay for a buyer's agent commission. This is negotiable and it may be removed, but it is likely. And we are giving you this disclosure to educate you, just to educate you that might be a likelihood, because we don't want you to be misled that this commission you're paying us may be the only commission. Because I think a lot of people are going to win over, listings by saying, oh, I only charge 4%. But here I have someone else saying 5%, but they were trying to tell them, hey, just be prepared. You're going to have to pay 2% or whatever to a buyer's agent, if that makes sense. So There's a lot of things with these agreements that you can change, add, kind of not manipulate, but make it make sense, right? And so that's what we're going to kind of get into with this agreement and how it can help your clients and really put you in a good position. So getting into it, this is California Association, CAR.org. I go to sign in. I sign in. I always like to show this because anyone who's new gets very confused. Transaction Center. You guys can see my screen, right?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I'm going to go to transaction zip forms. I go down to access zip forms. You wait for this to load. Turns yellow. You click it. Okay, then you're going to always do new, and you're going to do new purchase, and you're going to put your client's name. You don't put an address. You just click residential or whatever it is. Doesn't really matter. And then save, unless you have templates created. You'll pull up the client's file. This is a whole nother one. Add the client's details and parties. You don't need to add, obviously, the property because there is no property yet. But buyer, if you don't have it, it's not going to pop up automatically, but you're going to click all forms and you literally just type in the search bar buyer. And it's going to pop up buyer representation and broker compensation agreement. I open the form. The cool thing about this, and you're going to get a window that pops up and it's asking about workspace. I do not understand what it's asking. I'm used to the old way. And so every time I just click new workspace and it takes me right to the form. So just do that. But okay, so it's going to always start off with a disclosure regarding agency relationship. I think it's cool to have this initially start off because usually when you're submitting an offer for a client, that's the first time they're seeing all of these documents. And it can be overwhelming, right? You're signing an agreement and here you are first time seeing just all of this. So it at least gives them a good introduction into it. But here we go. They just changed this form. As you can see, July 24th, it was revised. So you always put the date prepared as the date you're preparing it because that's how they refer to it. Because if you get let's say it's a husband and wife you're representing, I signed today. Husband signs tomorrow, wife signs the next day. Well, what is the date of the contract that we're referring to? So it's always the date that you prepared it. That does not mean the date that they signed, but that's the date you refer to it. So when you check this box in the residential purchase agreement, it's going to say, a seller to pay for the buyer's agent commission outlined in the buyer representation and broker compensation agreement dated, and it's always going to be the date prepared. Hopefully that's clear. Put your client's name, representation period. So this is up to you on how long you want to put that. You can tell your client, like our company policies, if we want to cancel any agreement, you're more than welcome to, as long as the agent is still in the brokerage. The only reason why I do that is and that's true of listings. So any agreement, if you need to cancel it, we'll just sign off and cancel it. The broker I have to sign off and cancel it. If it's a listing and you have left the brokerage, it can be a little different. If it's active with no offers, we'll just sign off and transfer it. I don't really care. If you're in contract, it kind of changes because of liability issues. I have just seen it where someone failed to disclose a bunch of things and they were with Realty One Group and then they switched to EXP halfway through the transaction. Well, Realty One Group was the broker representing it initially during the failure to disclose, so it became this huge issue. Anyway, it's a whole nother conversation. So if you wanted to put 6 months, you can do this. If this is a new lead, I would put a couple weeks, but I just tell them, hey, it's up to you how aggressive you are, but I would just put a common date and just have that conversation. If they say, hey, how can you put 6 months? I just say, I don't know how long it's going to take. I just want you to know that I'm in it for the long haul with you. I'm not here to close you tomorrow on a house. I want you to know that I'm patient with you to find the right house. That's how I would push a longer time period with people, which is true. I've had clients that take 6 months. We've had clients take a year. We've had clients take a year and never buy. So that's why I put that agreement. If I need to cancel this, absolutely. Type of representation. I would always choose exclusive right to represent you. If we need to cancel this, then tell me that and I'll cancel this. But I don't want to be showing you houses and then you're signing agreements with someone else. Not that I think you're going to do that, but that's why we have this provision in here, because unfortunately there are people who will use and abuse me. And this is when I pull my family. I've got a daughter, I've got another child on the way. I'm sorry, but I'm just not leaving them for someone who doesn't want to commit to me. Just have that conversation that you don't want me to represent you. I won't be offended. We'll shake hands and part ways. We'll cancel the agreement. But I just have seen in the past where people use multiple people for some reason. And no one goes into your work and says, right, who's on the call? Right, Damaris? No one comes in and says, hey, I want you to clean my house, but I'm going to have someone else clean my house tomorrow, and I'm only going to pay them. Like, no one asks you to work for free at your job. Maybe Damaris was the bad choice, but right, Chanel? No one says, hey, can you come in to work for free today? It doesn't work. So I don't want someone to ask me that. I said that to someone before who was wanting me to give up a bunch of my commission for no reason. I just said, oh yeah, do people walk into your job and ask you to give up your paycheck for the day, or do you expect to get paid every time you put in work and effort? And they go, okay, that's fair. So just be okay with having these conversations with people. Obviously you can check all of the boxes if you want, but the property type, you can check multiple if you're working multiple things, right? So Nate has a client, he's showing he just sold a single family residence to, they're looking into multifamily. He could technically do it for all of these. County location, you could put the counties, cities, additional description, you can type whatever you want. If this is outside the area of Metro List, then because sometimes you'll get people who are looking in San Francisco and here, right? So you can put whatever you want. You could say if client purchases outside this area, that is between their agent there and them. Whatever you want to do. A lot of these additional descriptions is going to be more for when you have a client have an objection, right? Something that worries them. Feel free to go in here and type in something that handles that objection, right? Let's say someone says, I just don't know if I'm going to buy in Sacramento, but I might buy in Reno, and I know you don't have a license there. I would just say, listen, if you buy in Reno, it's totally fine. You don't owe me anything. I'll even type it in here. That way you feel confident that you don't owe me anything. That's how I would use that.
I have a suggestion for the additional description. Can we write greater Sacramento area, because that may cover, Sac County, Placer County, El Dorado County? Would that help that?
Yes, I would probably just get good at, and to your point, I would never put cities, because you just never know when something changes, and you don't want this to be null and void. So I would just get used to typing out all of those counties. If someone says, hey, why'd you put so many counties? I'm just looking in Placerville or Placer County. I just want Roseville. I just say, hey, it's my way of putting Greater Sacramento so that there's no confusion, right? Because Greater Sacramento might be up to speculation as to what is Greater Sacramento. So that would be my only caveat to maybe not putting Greater Sacramento and just getting used to putting the 4 counties: El Dorado, Sacramento, Placer, and Yolo. But that's up to you and your risk level with your client, right? If it's someone right, you're working with Melvin, Nate, he loves you. I don't think it's going to greatly matter, if that makes sense. But
hey, Cameron.
Yes.
I have a question about like the obsidies coming in.
Yeah.
How you want us to handle those, like for people we've never met. So I just got one yesterday. We're meeting at one property. I've not met them. Haven't completely won them over. Do you recommend in that case maybe having them sign the agreement just for that 1 or 2 properties you see, and then possibly expanding it so that they don't feel uncomfortable, but you're covering your bases? How do you think we should handle that?
Yeah, I would test it out starting with putting the counties and then just see what happens. you know. A lot of this is going to be case by case with you. I think there's some people who they're agents out of town and they just wanted to see one property they're not too sure about, right? And so I would just put the counties and see what they say. I think the main thing people are going to be focused about is going to be on this commission amount, and I'm going to show you what to put after that, and that's what I'm going to really highlight. Date periods is going to be the main one for your situation, Chanel. Is I would say, hey, right, I get an online lead, doesn't matter where it's from. Hey, in order to show you the property, I have to have a buyer broker compensation. Otherwise, I get fined, right? To Nate's point, you just use that. Because if they Google it, it's a statement. Yes, it's true. Yeah, so I could be fined if I don't have this agreement in place. So I'm going to put just it's a 2-week period. I just want to make sure that I'm representing you and helping this house. If you don't like me, like, and I piss you off, which I think I'm going to earn your business, then we can cancel this, no problem. But I'll just make it expire in 2 weeks. What I'd like to do is show you a couple properties, and then let's meet and talk more about how I can best help you, and then we can talk more about extending this contract. But it'll include that my fee for representing you, and because this is my value, like I'm good at what I do, I'm full-time in the industry, or whatever you want to say, just I would add value and justify it over the phone. I'm good at what I do. I'm really good at negotiating and helping you get not just a good deal, but the house you want. And my thing with this industry is I'm here to represent you, and so you're hiring me to represent you. You're not hiring me to sell you on something. So you don't like a house, I don't really mind. I'm here to find you what you want. Like, I'm your representative. So my going rate is 2.5%. You're going to see that in there. I do not believe that you as the borrower, or as the buyer, should pay that. I think sellers should be paying for that because they're using equity from values that have just skyrocketed over the last few years. So it's nothing out of their pocket. So you'll see a percentage in there under amount of compensation. Under that, you will see something in a section called other terms. I type out that it is my responsibility to make sure that in one way or another, the seller pay for that, whether we just have them pay, agree to pay for it through this, or they give you a large credit that equals the same amount. But I just want you to be reassured that this agreement is not saying that you have to pay me this out of pocket. I have to have this in place because nowadays you have to have a representative to see these houses. And I would just leave it at that and talk. The more confidently you can practice out loud saying that by yourself, the more confidently you're going to say it out loud to those leads. Does that make sense, Chanel? And anyone else? Hello?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so I would put 2 weeks. I would put multiple counties. If they say, oh, how about we just start off with this house? Then sure. I would just put, which they actually don't even have. Why don't they have the address anymore? Oh, they took out the address. I mean, you could put in additional description just that address, but that's interesting. They did have an address in here before. Following specified properties only. So you could just check that and type it here. But I would just do the counties and just do single family. Oh, is excluded. Wow, they changed all of this. Excluded from this agreement? Why would you ever check that? Okay, so just ignore the separate section. A single family residence, blah, 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 or if checked, multiple. See, sometimes you just have to read this stuff. Okay, so yes, that is what I'd put here of the acquisition price, and if any, you could put an amount or blah, 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 or see attached compensation schedule. That is where people talk about, I charge an hourly rate. I guess, if someone says, oh, I have an agent, but they can't drive out here, you could say, okay, but I charge an hourly rate, so I still have to have this agreement in place in order to show you the property. I'm going to check this box and put together my hourly rate. Yeah, so I guess you could do that. I'm going to honestly always put 2.5%, 3%, and I'm going to put it in here. Now, keep in mind that you could have a client re-sign this and increase it with your offer or decrease it with your offer. So, this might be a little interesting, you know, especially if I show a house today is say the 8th. Yeah. If I show a house today at the 8th, this is signed on the 8th. And then I write an offer on the 10th and I have this re-signed on the 10th, the agent may say, hey, how come you re-signed it? Did you not have one signed when you saw it? I would start off high when you sign this with your commission. And then if you find out it's a competitive situation, let's say I have this signed at 3%. I find out that there's multiple offers. I'm going to lower this to 2% because I'm okay with that, and I want to win over the offer. I'm going to have this re-sign, and I would tell the agent, hey, you know, I realize this is a competitive situation. I'm still motivated at 2%, which is so I just had them re-sign this at a lower amount, and that's why we're submitting this. You could also just type in your purchase agreement, buyer compensation to be, or you know, seller to pay buyer's agent 2%. But theoretically, that means that your client would pay an extra 1%. Does that make sense to everyone? So if I type in my offer, I find out it's competitive, and this is probably going to happen, especially with, you know, some of the nicer homes in more affluent areas. You may say, hey, no, my commission's 2.5%. And they're saying, hey, we'll only pay 1.5%. Okay, well, then I got to go to my client and figure out, are they okay with paying another 1% or 0.5% or whatever it might be? This is where working with a good lender, as rates start to fall and things start to get really competitive again, work with a lender who can work with you and make sure that you get compensated. What do I mean? There's things called rate bumps, and you can have these conversations with your lender about how you pitch it with someone. But I would just know your worth. Like, hey, for me to be in this industry and for it to make sense, otherwise I'm making minimum wage, I need to be paid 2.5%. So right now, if we can't win over an offer at 2%, you know, at 2.5%, and we have to reduce it to 2%, and you don't have the other 0.5% to pay me, let's talk with the lender about what we can do. And so the lender can say, how about we do a rate bump? 0.5% is $2,000. If I increase your rate, you know, 15 basis points, you know, mortgage basis points. So it's basically 0.15. I can get you a credit back that'll cover that amount. And that way you don't feel like you're coming out of pocket. It only affects your payment fractions, you know, $10 a month. That is going to be a strategy that you're going to have those conversations with your lender if you want to be compensated justly, in order for you to stay in this business. And I think a lot of lenders should be calling, if anyone's watching who's a lender, should be calling agents and having these conversations. You know, hey, if rates really drop, we all know competition is going to increase. And if you're trying to win it over and you need to offer less commission, how about you and I have that conversation in a consultation with our client and say, hey, if we find a really competitive house that you absolutely love, are you prepared to pay 1% to your agent, which would be, let's just say it's $5,000. So $500,000 purchase price. The client says, I'm sorry, but I don't have that extra money on top of everything else. Then we'll say, hey, how about we do this? We do a rate bump. Your payment won't change, you know, and there's the situation. So, but there's other things we can do, right? There's ways of saving them money by doing something called, we call it with United Wholesale Mortgage Track or Track Plus. That basically it's an attorney's opinion of the title. And so essentially it's just a way for borrowers to save a lot more money on the loan side, which can then translate into paying you as the agent a just commission. Does that make sense to everyone on the call? That's a whole nother, these little tactics, I'm just saying that there are lenders out there who are working on ways of reducing the cost on their end for the consumer. That way, that way home ownership is, open to more people, but also that way they can compensate you. Anyone have any questions about that? So here's the other key things that they're adding in here. I want everyone, especially if you're watching this recording, this form's going to change multiple times over the next year or so, because there's going to be issues. There just always is. They didn't write this incorrectly. I'm just saying that there's always going to be issues that arise that they need to add things in. I actually do appreciate when they change it because they're addressing issues in a proactive way. Well, reactive way, but still. Continued right to payment for broker involved properties. So Chanel, to your point, if someone said, no, I only want this to last a week, I'm going to make sure that I add 7 days here. I'm going to always add 7 days. So I want to make sure that if I show a house, they're not saying they want to cancel the next day because their agent was out of town and is going to write the offer. Because this is going to say that I have an additional 7 days, which most of us know, especially as the markets get more competitive. If I see a house, 7 days later, it's going to be off the market. So this buys me as an agent time that I know if you cancel this or it expires, you're not just going and writing an offer with someone else. Like you're out of luck on the house that I've already worked and spent time showing you. Once again, I will always use the example of Mr. Buyer, Miss Buyer, whatever it might be. Do you go into work and your boss says, hey, I need you to work for free today? Because I just need you to work for free today. Does that ever happen in your employment? And, they're going to say no. Okay, well, I do not expect it to happen with me. So there's that. But the continuation period shall be, I would do 7 or 14 days or 10 days, calendar days after. Remember, with a lot of these agreements, make sure you read whether and highlight that it's calendar or business days, because it's important with timelines. Calendar days after the representation period or any extension continuation period. So non-exclusive, cancellation effective upon receipt or within so many days after receipt. Okay, exclusive, cancellation effective 30 days after receipt. So whatever. Time to deliver buyer personal/financial information within 5 calendar days from the execution of this agreement. So what is this saying? This is saying that if you're showing a buyer, they're adding in here that the buyer needs to figure out their finances. There's no more, which I don't know how you could ever enforce this, but that they're supposed to figure out their financial situations within a certain time period according to this. Does that make sense? I think part of why they've added this into it, because if you're going to ask for compensation and they don't have the money to pay for it, you're protected theoretically by putting it in here that, they're supposed to provide you proof that they can pay your commission. My thing is, this is so much of a relationship business versus a sales business, and you're going to know that up front. I hope everyone understands that. And that's just what you would have this conversation with them about. Other financial considerations, buyer does not have sufficient funds to pay. I mean, you could check that if you want. I don't know why you would. I just wouldn't check either one of these. Buyer intends to purchase with the following loan product, which does not allow buyer to pay compensation. There is no loan product right now that prevents a buyer from paying your compensation. Crystal clear. Anyone watching the recording wants to challenge me on that, you can email me at info@visionforwardrealty.com, because I've looked at every guideline and that is not. VA and FHA already changed, and they said that they're totally fine. It does not factor into their restrictions. So that neither one of those should be paid or should be checked. If anyone says, oh, my loan does not allow me to pay your compensation, first of all, I would highlight that, well, okay, that's why I typed in this other terms, but that's false also. So your lender's lying to you. Advisories, addenda, sorry, my eyes right now, very dyslexic. The following advisory, addenda, and disclosures are attached: broker compensation advisory, blah, blah, blah. So this is where you could, if we ever implemented any other disclosures, you would check that and type it in there. And And then you can go and I would read some of this stuff. Here's my main thing. If you're new and you don't understand something and someone asks you about it, scroll down to the paragraph that highlights it, right? Because a lot of our forms now get right to the point up here and then talk in more detail down here. And so if they say, you know, what is exclusive versus non-exclusive? This is exactly what I'd say. I don't want to misstate it. So how about we read it together and we'll talk about it. So go down to buyer right to compensation. Okay, non-exclusive representation, broker involvement. Compensation is payable only if there was broker involvement with the property. Exclusive representation, buyer acquisition. If exclusive is checked in paragraph 2A2 and initialed in paragraph 15, broker is entitled to compensation if buyer acquires property during the representation period or any extension with or without broker involvement, even if another broker is also entitled to be paid for representation, representing buyer. So that's where, right, I think there's going to be huge issues with this. And I think this is going to change because I think that there are going to be people, especially if you're in our Sacramento area, you get a lot of Bay Area agents who are going to check that box. Their clients they're going to tell their client to go, this happens all the time, to go to realtor.com or Zillow. And they're going to have one of us show them the house and the agent in San Francisco is going to write the offer. What's going to happen is your clients who signed this is going to get in contract, and now we have to go to arbitration because they owe compensation to both. So people are going to get screwed over. So just make sure that they cancel whatever agreement. You're going to find that you're going to have people that say, I was working with someone. Boom. To me, that's a red flag in my head. Whether it's realtor.com and they said I was working with someone, but I'm looking for someone who might be a better fit. All right, that's what they say all the time. Or if you have just someone say that to you, boom, red flag in my head. I need to see at some point you signed a buyer representation and broker agreement, right? They showed you a house. Oh, I don't remember. I need you to send me that before I do anything moving forward. And this is, I'm being really serious right now. This is to protect you because there are things that people can check in that agreement that can really put you in a bad position. And I just want to make sure that if you want to choose me to represent you, that's my first thing that I need to do in representing you is check that. Essentially what you would do is you would make sure that they did not check exclusive. And if they did, you need to check the expiration. You need to check what they put for the continuation period shall be and what they put there. And then there needs to be a cancellation signed by your client. Does that make sense to everyone? What I just said, because I do want to make sure that if that did not make sense, that someone says something. Oh, look at the mirror. David, does that make sense? David might be a little busy. Or Chanel. I lost everyone on our call.
No, everything makes sense.
Okay.
I probably will have to, honestly, once I'm in it, I'm probably going to be sending stuff to you to make sure I'm doing it correctly. But
yeah,
I'm sure we'll all have questions.
That's our agreement, right? Our brokerage, which, you know, not to get on this conversation, but if the labor department, which they should, in my opinion, crack down on the realtor industry, you know, essentially our brokerage should be set up similar to like CAR and NAR. Like we are an association that you pay a due to, and that we are here to work for you. Right now, it really seems like everyone is working for the company, which makes you an employee. So yes, send me this so I can review it anytime. My only ask is that you at least take some time to review it yourself first versus just asking me to do everything for you. Not that I think no one in our brokerage does that. I always have to say that because some of the stuff is clear, some of it's not clear. And if you want strategies, that's what I'm here for. Absolutely. Like, let's talk about how do I strategize this? It's just some of these things, if you're like, oh, I don't understand what it is, I would read it first because a lot of times it makes a lot of sense. And it's either it makes total sense or it makes zero sense at all. So, and I'm happy to help you with that.
Well, Cameron, I was just thinking,
Yeah.
You talk about people leaving the industry. This is probably even more so going to hit realtors hard who have big brokerage splits like 70-30, and then if they're lowering commissions and
Mm-hmm.
anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're lowering commissions and you know, and that's the thing is, I think new agents, what do you call it? God, the when people fall out.
Retaining
Yeah. No, there's another word.
their
Anyway, people are going to
that's the
fall
opposite.
out of from new agents to, you know, being in the industry like that 1 to 2 year period. You're going to see a lot more people falling out. You know, I think the rate right now is pretty high of people falling out. It's going to exacerbate or whatever that word is. It's gonna really increase because it's so common for new agents to jump right to reducing commission or offering up their commission. And myself included, when I was a new agent, I just did not pay attention to the splits, the extra fees. And so you have, and not to throw them under the bus, but to throw them under the bus, you have Coldwell Banker, Keller Williams, Lion, Remax. You have so many of the old school agents that have this administrative fee, transaction fee. They call it all kinds of things, but it's an extra 5 to 7% on top of your split that gets taken off. And when you're over here reducing your commission, thinking like, hey, I'm showing this property, honestly, $2,000 even or $5,000 would go a long way. So I'm going to reduce my, for me, and I just need to make some money. So I'm going to reduce my commission to 1% so I don't have to have that tough conversation. They want to work with me. Okay, boom. I make my 1%. It's $5,000. Next, where's my phone? Oh, it's recording, right? Next, I'm on a 70-30 split, to your point, Chanel. I make 70, but then there's a 6% administrative fee, and then there's a $150 transaction fee, and then I have to pay my transaction coordinator fee and my brokerage push this in-house transaction coordinator that charges $450, even though I had another one tell me they only charge $375. And now I'm left with $400, and I showed probably 8 properties, and a full tank of gas is $100. I am now losing money. I quit. This is bullshit, right? That's going to be what happens a lot. So, yes, it's going to be very interesting, this whole thing, in a good way. I just really encourage, whether people are watching this recording and you're not in my brokerage or not, just know your worth. Understand, and this is where listing agents have got to get good at educating their seller. You have equity from appreciation. Like, we are not in a tanking market. You do not have, I mean, yes, you have equity from paying down your mortgage, but most of your equity is from appreciation. It's going to be the fact. So you need to use that to compensate someone. I would, here's my thing is, okay, so let's say someone asked for 2.5%, and I had a bunch of agents ask for 1%. I guarantee you that person who asked for 2.5% were the only ones that called me. I know, especially in these coming months, that a lot of other listings, especially if things get competitive when rates drop, they're going to start asking for people to reduce their commission versus, doing other things, right? And so that agent is definitely going to be more motivated to work to keep the deal together because they know that they may not get that commission on the next deal. Does that make sense to everyone? And I think it's a good thing. I think this change is good because before, I mean, I had a time when I was in contract on $1 million property with my client. They were only offering 2%. My client found out. I don't even remember how. They said, how do you get compensated? I'm like, we make, 2 to 3%. It just depends on the property. They said, well, who determines that? And I said, oh, the listing agent does when they take the listing. And they go, oh, well, this guy must be offering a lot because he's related to the sellers. So he's probably giving them a deal. And I go, oh, no, to be honest, he's offering very little. He's offering, I think it was like less than 2%. And they got so upset because the seller was saying they weren't willing to replace the broken water heater. And they're like, just cancel. We're not going to close on a deal where someone's going to penny pinch every single way. because I don't know, I don't trust someone like that.